Sir, I've reached out to many, asking for help with a matter of my service. I'm a dual branch veteran. I'll say this as a preface to this. This is extemporaneous. I haven't even and I do this purposely. It isn't that I'm too lazy to write to have an outline, but I have testified to these things before, and my YouTube channel was terminated just on the 30th of November of this year, and on there was testimony about all the things that I am going to mention now and ask you if you can please consider helping me with. And the thing is that I captured that multi-billion-dollar fallout from that illegal burn-off on the Pennsylvania border that was conducted by Norfolk Southern when they burned off those at least 34 railroad containers of hazardous materials, and all of the contamination went into Beaver and Lawrence County here in Pennsylvania. There's a complete record, sir, from the night of the derailment on the Pennsylvania border through the 6th, when they did the massive illegal disposal of everything that was left on the site, the derailment site on the Pennsylvania border. It all blew onto Pennsylvanians. Millions of pounds of carcinogenic industrial hazardous materials, chemicals. And I captured the video of them intentionally burning off containers in Pennsylvania on the 5th. And I captured the massive, event that we remember, that plume in East Palestine that went up. Well, the winds, the heat carried that up, and then the winds took it to the east. So even that day, there was no contamination of East Palestine. The winds carried it onto Pennsylvania. The chemicals were, they had properties, sir, that the Honorable Sil Sagano, a hazardous material specialist over there at the Youngstown Fire Department, a chief over there, he mentioned it when he went on Channel 27 Youngstown News. He was trying to embarrass Norfolk Southern and those multi-billion-dollar corporations that were working with the authorities there, including the Governor DeWine and so many, and the media too, sir. They all work together, to supplant East Palestine as the disaster area, when in fact that's where they reported on everything in safety, because all of the winds blew into Pennsylvania. They were all to the east. Again, I can't emphasize it enough, sir. It's all on satellite and radar imagery. And when you see it disappear from radar, it's because it has fallen out. And Sil Sagano said that. He said that the chemicals had properties by which they would attract water molecules, and they would get heavy and they would fall out. That's what he said on Channel 27 News the night before they did that. I sent out a video of them intentionally burning off containers from Sunday afternoon there off of Route 51, looking down the tracks towards East Palestine. But it was on the Pennsylvania, on the tracks in Pennsylvania, they were burning off containers. And I sent that out to all the media, and the media then got back to the command center where they were reporting on everything and managing everything in safety of the illegal burn off, and reporting on it as a disaster that was East Palestine, which it wasn't. But they got the message, that I had sent the media out that footage of them intentionally burning off containers, and that I mentioned in that with the footage, I said, well, what if one of these containers, get hot, are hot, and empty out, and how, if there is a hole by which they're leaking, so they intentionally burn all that shit off. So it wasn't like the containers all had holes in them. They were dumping that shit out, and burning it. But I said, what if, they get, the ones that if it has a hole in it and it's hot and it lets out all the chemical, but then there's oxygen in there, it's hot, and what if it then explodes? Well, they read that, and I think what it was is that they said, you know what, if that dummy believes it, probably everybody would believe it. So they made up the story about there being a container that needed to have pressure let off of it. And that's what Governor DeWine used, that premise, that lie, to then declare the lie, declare what was a criminal. Criminally, he declared a state of emergency. And traitorously, he activated our Army National Guard to stand as guard to keep people from going in there and recording anything with the preparations that were done for the massive illegal dispersal, disposal, the cleanup, from the plume. Well, they hid all of that, and I captured the media, sitting there in Beaver County, WTAE, on time-stamped cellular video with the fallout. So all of these things, why do I tell you this? Again, because I mentioned it before. I tell you this because I was monitored, surveilled by both state and federal authorities because of the multi-billion-dollar disaster that was hidden, and there were so many that were complicit in its being hidden from thousands of people in Pennsylvania who got dosed, who were never given the opportunity to shelter in place, sir, to tape up their windows and doors to mitigate that contamination of those carcinogens. I was symptomatic, for at least a month, severely so for nearly a week. So I know that they were bad. But the reason why I bring it up is there was no formality in my being surveilled, of my being monitored, so as that I couldn't ever get that story out to anybody. So seeing that there wasn't any formality in that, I said, you know what, I know you've done a background check on me, I've been investigated and I'm being surveilled, because I did as well capture the most complete video of the World Trade Center attacks when I lived up there. And I was monitored by our National Security Agency then, and they have control over my Facebook and YouTube channel from that time, using it probably as like bait to see who watches them, and visits that site, to gather whatever intel they can, But I said, look, there's been no formality in my being surveilled. I said, could you please look into my military records? Because there was something that was done when I served our nation. I'm a 2-branch veteran, and in both branches of service, there was something that was done that I would like a fair and just result in. And I can't really, it's hard for me to convey what all this means. But I waited years to even file for any benefits, with any compensation whatsoever. So now I have a percentage. But, for years I didn't have anything. And, even my, waiting 10 years to release that 9/11 video, that most complete video, it's called Tuesday Morning in September. I was hopeful that I could have sold nominally, at a nominal fee, copies of it, thinking like with the Zapruder factor. Imagine if he was selling copies of the film, that you could personally, from his hand, it'd be kind of cool. Not that I'm anybody, sir, but I'm saying that is pretty unique that you could get a copy of the World Trade Center, the most complete chronicle captured of the attacks from the person who captured it. So I thought maybe I could have taken that money from DVD sales and, taking care of my dental, which, as a disabled veteran, I've had injuries by no fault of my own in service. And when I was in the Air Force, the injuries I'm talking about led to 2 spinal fusions. In truth, sir. So, I have lived, in paucity for most of these years, not being able to even afford to get an extraction for my tooth or anything like that. You have to have a 100% rating with the VA, their rating of 100% even to get an antibiotic for a bodily infection from a tooth. I know from experience, sir. I've been fighting infections only by God's grace. Have I not succumbed to having abscessed jaw from infections and, double vision infections from my teeth? Having to go to dental schools, one in New Jersey that they forced a drill through the pulp so a student could get his root canal to graduate. That's the truth, sir. The other time, the student at the Pittsburgh School of Dental Medicine, he was a really malicious son of a gun, man. This kid, there were, I think, 5 teeth that they extracted on the bottom. He did. There was another student that came in. There wasn't anyone to supervise what they did. But that student, he didn't suture after the extractions. So it all flattened out. There is no ridge or anything. So I have to be careful or I'll drool, I've got that problem. And he scraped it so bad. He really was an evil little motherfucker. And if it wasn't for being in Christ, I probably, would have hunted him down. That's how bad it was. If someone did to you what they did to me, you would probably feel the same way. It is like that, though, isn't it? When somebody does you wrong. Outside of Christ, you'd be prone to those type of evil thoughts. We're all evil. Jesus told us that no one is good but God. So I've been through a lot. And, my experience started there in the Army National Guard. I had, here's the thing. I quit school, and I joined the Guard. And that was at the 229th Field Artillery, the battalion there in Newcastle. And I quit school. My family came into money, and I got to see just how ugly it is when, they came into money, and I was not in their conversation, and I felt like they really didn't want nothing to do with me. It was weird. I just wanted to get the hell away from them. It was so disgusting how they acted with a little bit of money. And I love my parents. I miss them dearly. They passed away years ago. But the thing is, the recruiter had to come out to the house, and my parents signed me over to the government. And I turned 18 when going through boot camp. But I was, I waited almost a year ahead of time before I was, I got to go to boot camp. But the thing is, I was given this bonus for the MOS that I chose. It's like, and I thought, why the hell am I getting this bonus for this 36 kilo tactical wire specialist when a monkey could have done that job? Now, I don't mean I'm exaggerating, but I'm just saying it wasn't like I needed to have any, real intelligence or skill. And I was like, it was about putting down communications between Hollisters and the command, the fire command. And also, being a forward observer. Yeah, that was kind of cool. But what am I saying? I went through boot camp at Fort Jackson, South Carolina in 1983. The cycle I was in was the same year that our Marines were killed in Beirut. I was going through basic training when that happened. Now, I give you a reference of when that was, in 1983. I think that the bonus that they gave me for that MOS was a flag. Me being a high school dropout, I was chosen for something, as were other guardsmen and reservists. Because as we were going through the shot line, they split us off, and we went into another area to get our shots. And I was like, why? I got this adrenaline hit then, sir. You see, I knew something was wrong, and I was given discernment. I was like, why? I asked the nurse. I was like, why are we in a separate shot line? We're all getting the same shots. I know we're all getting the same shots. We were told we're all getting the same shots. Why they split us off? And she looked at me like she had such pity for me. And I was like, oh shit. It was just like one of those situations where you're like, what the fuck? what the fuck am I going to do now? So I got whatever it was that they gave me and barely made it through training. And a lot of other guys who got the shots, when we went back through, they sent us through another series of shots when we got so sick. We were in the World War II barracks, the top of Tank Hill at Fort Jackson. I don't know, you went through officers training, if you know Fort Jackson, I don't know if you ever were there. But those World War II barracks were right atop of what they call Tank Hill. And right after our cycle, all of those barracks those barracks were all torn out right after we were done. We were the last cycle to go through them. My uncle was familiar with them because he went through his boot camp in those same barracks, maybe even the same barrack that I went through. Isn't that something? My uncle during Vietnam. It was pretty cool. I love my uncle. He died from Agent Orange exposure. The thing is, when we went on to Fort Gordon for our AIT, I was so sick I don't even remember the training. But there was an epidemic from whatever it was that we were given in that shot line. There was a contagion factor with it. It must have been because the bay that I was in, I was the last guy. Like there were 8 in the bay. Picture that. You got 2, 4, 6, 8. Kind of a bay. Whereas, the World War II barracks, you know what they look like. And so I was the last one. I was so stubborn. I'm like, there's no way they're going to recycle me. I'm not going through this again. And when I got back to my battalion, I talked to my commander. I talked to my first sergeant. I was like, hey, this is what was done to me. I said, look, I was so sick I barely made it through training. And I said, they gave me something. In that shot line, they gave me something. And those men, of course, I didn't get, they were like, they just like, they didn't want to even hear it. I didn't have any health care, which is why you think, okay, years go by, you think, well, why would they choose to use, I understand about it, I was a high school dropout, okay, that's one thing. You think, well, this guy ain't worth it anyway, just some fucking loser. Another thing, sir, now let's be honest. Do you understand what I'm trying to say here when they're picking, choosing test, subjects? That's not so crazy to suggest that was part of it, because I could never figure out why. That was like a red flag that was indicating that I was, that I've chosen for that. I believe that. That's probably what it was. And guardsmen and reservists, we didn't have any health care or anything either. That's a pretty inexpensive test subject. So whatever it is that they would have, any manifestation from that pathogen, it would not be of no cost to our government, sir. We're talking about, the administration during the Reagan administration, and Reagan maybe had no knowledge of even the program. I don't know. But whoever the hell it was in charge, there were people that conducted, a secret virus program, and I was used as a test subject. And I had no health care. So my mother, I was raised on a small farm. I was raised during a time when the small farmers, they were all, they couldn't make it because of industrial farming came in the 1980s. My dad lost his equipment. He lost everything and had to then, that was it. So my mother, though, loved horses. So she kept her horses, so many horses. And she could get antibiotics for her horses, veterinary, antibiotics. And she would send me Bactrim, was one antibiotic that would work whenever I'd have, an outbreak from whenever my immune system would get hammered. Those symptoms would raise their head with whatever the hell it was that was flagged then. I did have blood drawn, later, and it was discovered that I had a retrovirus. It was some sort of a retrovirus, engineered, what they gave me. It didn't have a contagion factor. My wife now of 34 years has never got it, man. How many times I'm saying we copulated, and of course, because of my injuries, that happened in the Air Force that led to 2 spinal fusions. I couldn't have kids, truth, but, I'm saying I was intimate with her. I'm saying the exchange of bodily fluids. Okay? She never got it. There was no contagion with it. That's how it was engineered, I believe. But I nearly succumbed to that. How many times over the years? How many times? The same symptoms. I would be, I would have the same symptoms, whereas you go from like into a bronchitis and walking pneumonia within like a couple of days, just real fast. It would come on, and it's like the only thing that could help then would be like a multi-spectrum antibiotic, ciprofloxacin. I could get that at pet stores, for fish, that fish ciprofloxacin for tanks, and I got the Bactrim, and once in a while I could get a hold of a multi-spectrum antibiotic. Somebody had some, or I managed to get it, but it was years of suffering with that, and plus I waited so long. Also, I had those injuries from the Air Force that led to 2 spinal fusions, and I waited too long to get those surgeries. And when I did get the surgeries, the surgeon told me I had scar tissue, on those, on my thecal sac, that protects our spinal cord from the impingement. So he said, you got inveterate problems here. And But speaking of keeping with the secret virus program, I'm speaking the truth in this matter. If I've reached out to the Trump administration about this, asking for help. I don't know. It's like, what do they have? How many people they have that monitor the threads, to send messages to him if he ever would even get one of these messages. But I reached out. I reached out to Delugio asking for help. Delugio is such a corrupt motherfucker that he, corrupt. I'm talking about how he won't even use the word criminal or illegal to address what was done to his constituents here in District 17. But he won't even return a phone call from me, and I've sent him out asking him for help in this matter, and also all of the irrefutable evidence about the fallout, and he hasn't even had the decency, to even give me a phone call and ask me about the footage, let alone to help me as a disabled veteran about this matter. So, the secret virus program, that's one thing, sir. That's enough that I could ask, hey, could you look into this, and could I get a fair and just result from that? But there's more, sir. You see, I wanted to serve complete active duty, so I didn't want the Army, though. After what happened with that fucking shit, I didn't want nothing to do with the Army. So, I wanted the Air Force. But the Air Force wouldn't take me unless I had a high school diploma. So I had to get a high school diploma, and I only needed a few credits. Correspondingly, I was able to get my diploma. The same diploma as everyone else that was in my class at the time that I quit school. I got the same diploma as them. So that's what I went into the Air Force, and I had a penchant. I had an affinity, whatever you want to say. My talents, were in audiovisual, in graphics, so I had a portfolio, that I'd put together, and I brought it with me down to Lackland Air Force Base. And my training instructors were really, really decent men. They let me have an interview with someone there, base administration, where orders were cut, because they had me, my orders were to be a security police officer. I would have gone to, my school would have been down there at Lackland in the Air Force, and I'd have been a security police officer. Okay, well, if that was what it was, and okay, but I brought my portfolio, and I was like, I really would like to work in this field. I believe I would be, I could really, really do some good work for the Air Force in this capacity, and so it was okay. They were like, yeah. So I got what I wanted that way. I got into the AFSC that I asked for. So I was waiting there at Lackland, and You know, then I got my orders. I was even put in with a group that were being processed out that had failed, and every other word was fuck this place, fuck the Air Force, fuck. And man, I managed to keep my countenance and, you know, there, because I waited quite a while to get my orders, man. I was like, holy shit, it was something else, man. But then I was assigned to a detachment from Lackland. My headquarters squadron, the 1365th Audiovisual Squadron, was there at Lackland Air Force Base. And my detachment was Detachment 4, which was at Eltis Air Force Base. Eltis was predominantly a MAC base, Military Airlift Command, but also we had TAC and SAC. So I supported, you know, all three there. When I first got there, sir, they called him, no, it was actually my NCOIC. He was a real sadistic son of a gun. Now, I had never experienced, you know, prejudice, you know, from like reverse prejudice before too much. My experiences in life, you know, I was raised in a very prejudiced area, but, you know, the Lord put me into friendship. My mentor, one of my mentors was a black man, a guy that my dad worked with. He was a coon hunter, and I would go on night hunts with him all the time. And I loved the man. You know, I couldn't even see a flaw in him. You know, he was a God given to me. And it was out of an experience that happened when I was in elementary school at Shenango Elementary School, and the only black kid in our class, and I was around this desk with two other guys, and I had two others and a black kid, Michael Carter was his name, and I said something to him that it was just like I was parroting, you know, some shit that I'd heard around me from where I was raised, and I don't even remember what it was, but the Lord, God Almighty, the God and Father of our Lord Jesus, caused to become that I felt that kid's pain. And oh my God, it's one of those moments where time stood still, and I said, please, Lord, I don't want to be this way. I don't ever want to hurt somebody like this again. Please help me, change me. I'm serious, this is what happened. And then before I knew it, you know, like my mentor was Ernie Johnson, a friend that my dad worked with, from Medusa Corporation there in Wampum, Pennsylvania. And when I went to our Air Force, my first duty station at Eltis Air Force Base, there was my NCOIC Tech Sergeant Stanley Beauchamp. He was one of the most prejudiced people I've ever met, and he was very sadistic. He isolated me from everyone and studied me like a psychology project, and had me in this area where he studied me for a long time, away from you know, the folks that I was supposed to serve with at that detachment. And everyone was coming up to me privately, and they were like, hey, Beauchamp is a real fucking asshole. You know, we see what he's doing to you, you know, and like, yeah, he's a real fucking asshole. Everyone's telling me that. I'm like, yeah, I'll be all right. And then then when I got with, you know, brought into the detachment, into my unit, integrated with them, Beauchamp was just like a very prejudiced son of a gun, man. If I would have been in Christ, in the Word then, I'd have handled the situation differently. But you see, I didn't know what to do, because in that detachment there was nowhere for me to go. And what really spurred it on is that I had relations with this fellow service member, and she was a black girl, Sherelle Turner. She was at the base hospital. And, you know, she was a fellow Air Force member. And we got married, you know, and Beauchamp, man, that just ripped him up, man. He couldn't stand it. and he would just fucking get me alone and say the most fucked up things to me. He just had a the way he would fucking ride me, and the shit that he would say to me. I really don't want to revisit it, but it was so bad, and I had nobody to turn to, man, in that detachment. I tried to talk to people about it, and all they would say is, yeah, we know what he's like, but what the fuck? Nobody would help me. It was bad. I don't think they realized how bad it was. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go to Base Social Actions about this guy. Now here's the thing. I went to Base Social Actions. The CO, his name was Captain Ayers. Ayers, Ayers. And I knew right away that this guy was not for me. And I was like, oh, I fucked up. I shouldn't be over here. I knew it. Man, it was like the way he would look at me, and the way it's like he was a prejudiced motherfucker. He was so prejudiced. I was like, I fucked up on this one. I made it back to my detachment after that meeting with him, and I walk in the door, and Sergeant Beauchamp, he was from Kentucky, and he had a distinct way of speaking that I never will escape my memory. He's like, Kosha, I just got off the phone with Captain Ayers. He said you were over there saying bad things about me. And I'm standing there, I'm like, we're alone. He's telling me this. He's like, yeah, Captain Ayers and I, we've been good friends for a long time. And, yeah. I was like, man, did I fuck up? Woo. What now, right? Things didn't get any better. Beauchamp just found more ways that he could fuck with me, and everyone was aware of how prejudiced this guy was in my unit and my detachment, but nobody offered to help. I was like, what the hell am I going to do about this fucking guy? He's making my life miserable. And I told my aunt about it here in District 17. That's where I live now. My aunt has passed away years ago. But I told her, Leoma Swetlik, I'm like, Aunt O. She was Aunt O to me. Omi, we called her. But Aunt O. I said, Aunt O, this guy is really bad. He's making my life fucking miserable. And I've gone to Base Social Actions, and I'm in trouble. This is bad. I don't know what the hell to do. And she said, Jimmy, I'm good friends with, she said, I know my congressional representative. I'm going to talk to him about it. Now, I didn't react to that. Like, I was like, no flags went up right away, except I was thinking, I don't know, but I didn't say anything. And then I called her back within a couple weeks, and I said, Anno, about that thing, I said, I would prefer you not say anything to your representative. I don't know what that means for me. And she said, Jimmy, I've already talked to him. So I'm like, fuck, what does this mean? And I'm waiting then. When's this congressional inquiry going to hit? Now, the thing is, sir, it was what was conducive, I understand, to me really being the best that I could be in my job. And in the interim of that phone call, and here's what happened. I had been then recognized through that time. It took like 2 years for that fucking congressional inquiry to materialize. Why? It seemed like it was that long. By the time they got things going, here's what happened. I had been recognized as and awarded as being the best that the United States Air Force had in my AFSC. And they told me that I would be serving at the Pentagon in honor of that. So I was waiting on orders to serve at the Pentagon in honor of being recognized and awarded as being the best that the Air Force had in my job, my AFSC. So, I should have sewed on sergeant but long before then because of my prior service in the Guard. But they fast-tracked me. Another thing that you can look at and think about. They fast-tracked me to sew on sergeant to become an NCO, and I didn't have to go to NCO school. That's the truth, man. So everything's looking pretty good. I'm riding cloud nine, man. I'm like, I'm at the pinnacle. I have the golden ticket. I'm like, you know what? Things are looking pretty damn good. And then I'm told that congressional inquiry hit the base. I had a working relationship with the base commander, Colonel Hazeltine. You know, we worked on the welcome package for the C-17 to be brought into action. We were one of the first bases then that received the C-17 after I was gone, but we worked together, and I had a lot of respect for him, a working respect. And I was told that he was passed over for Brigadier General because of the congressional inquiry, sir. So what happened then to me is I went from Wonder Boy waiting for these orders to work to serve at the Pentagon, at the pinnacle of where I could be as an enlisted man, with quite an opportunity ahead of me, huh? I went from that to having these two airmen, Airman Bemis and Airman Dallaire, set me up in my workplace, and they stood in front of me that I couldn't get out of a room. They were in this doorway, and I was like, I knew it was like, what the fuck is going on here? You know what I'm saying? The shit hit the base, and then I was taken out of my unit and made to work with prisoners, and I wasn't a prisoner. I was out picking up cigarette butts in front of at the front gate, and, you know, carrying old mattresses out of dormitories that were being remodeled, shit like that. Became my duty. And these two airmen had set me up. They would move out of my way, and all I'd said to them is, sir, I said, get the fuck out of my way. You know, that's what I said to them. I said, and I meant it. I said, get the fuck out of my way. Because they were standing there purposely blocking my way. You know, I'm not going to lay my hands on them. I'm not going to do anything stupid like that. But I'm like, get the fuck out of my way. And on that, they took me out of my workplace. And then they would have me called into my workplace, and they would like dequalify me on tasks. You know, I was even a supervisor. I had two subordinates, you know, before they did this to me. And I just sewn on NCO, and like I said, I was awaiting orders to work at the Pentagon in honor of being awarded being the best that the Air Force had in my job. So here I am now being brought in, and they would dequalify me, downgrade me in tasks, and they were putting together, fabricating, backdating, making me look like I was a problem airman. And I knew, I'm like, you know what, they got a hell of a task ahead of them. It was a bad time for me. This whole thing cost me my marriage. I ended up getting a divorce, you know, because Sherelle, too, she had pressure put on her from this whole situation. Now, I got injured, you know, 2 injuries to my spine there at Altus Air Force Base. You can look in my records, there's a polygraph I volunteered about those, you know, that shows no deception. And it was taken by somebody that wasn't my friend. He was a former government polygraph whatever they call it, polygraph reader, a polygraph, whatever. Yeah, he worked for the government for years as a polygraph examiner. That's what they're called, I guess. But anyway, you know, there was no deception, and I tell about those events, what happened, because I couldn't get a buddy statement from one of them, and the other one, it's like my records were all fucked up because of all of this, sir. Because, you know, I don't know, it was really weird, but I was assigned to then my last duty in the United States Air Force. I was assigned to the base command, and they had worked up this paperwork, you know, this shit, exaggerated bullshit or whatever, fabricated bullshit even, and they needed me to sign it in order for me to be in agreement with it, to fire me, you know, to get rid of me. And my last duty station, sir, I was put into this area in base command where there was no traffic. This staff sergeant was assigned. They put a desk in this area. They moved it in and had him sit in front of me. And I was to sit at attention like every day day after day after day, and to the extent, I'm telling you the truth, this guy was there to make sure that I didn't slouch or anything. I was denied medical attention. And they told me, we want you to sign, this paperwork. And, of course, I resisted that. I'm like, I'm not going to sign anything. I didn't do anything. Like, there's no justification for me to even be here. And I tried explaining that, and they didn't want to hear that from me. And whoever the first shirt in the Air Force, or first shirt, not first sergeant, the first shirt of base command, who was conducting the torture, he wouldn't listen to me. And I kept thinking, I'm like, okay, I was told by a couple different people that there was this congressional inquiry that had sabotaged, my base commander's promotion to brigadier general. And I could understand that, but I had nothing to do with it. I don't even know who the congressman was that my aunt, Leoma Svetlik, even talked to from District 17 then. Ironically, we got Chris DeLucio, that fuckwad, here now. And I don't say that with too much love. But I don't know who it was then. But I kept thinking, that maybe whoever it is that's investigating that, congressional aide or somebody, I'm delusional, I guess, thinking that they're going to find me, at base command. And then looking back on it, I look back on it years later, and I'm like, maybe there was some kind of quid pro quo between the congressional representative in District 17, Pennsylvania, and whoever the hell the district congressional member was there where Altus Air Force Base was. Maybe they worked, in cahoots, I'll give you a heads up on this. About that. About this social actions inquiry. I don't know. I mean, maybe you being an officer, you would understand this thing more. Certainly you do understand what it would mean for a base, a post commander, a base commander, to be passed over, if they're colonel, being passed over for brigadier general over a social actions issue, an inquiry, a congressional inquiry. You would know, being, a former military officer, that could ruin somebody's promotion. I think you would know that, right? Well, that's what happened. And I was put in his hands for that whole process. Now, I tell you in truth, I was there so long that I had lost track of the days. I say that so glib, but you try sitting at attention for one day, then try sitting at attention needing medical attention for spinal injuries that then result in 2 spinal fusions. So I got these raw injuries. And I'm just made to sit at attention. When I say made to sit at attention, sir, I know that they had nothing on me. And they gave me a direct order to sit at attention. And what they were trying to do was to degrade my discharge. I knew they were going to get rid of me. And I had nobody, sir. And in time, I experienced this time. I experienced something where I recognized, I'm like, that is what it is to snap, to have something. So something happened, and throughout this whole thing. And I kept thinking about having to go back to my unit and how they had turned on me when the shit rolled downhill from base command, when Colonel Hazeltine was passed over for brigadier general. And I'd have to go back in there with them. And I could see who was complicit in it. In order to fight my way out of this thing, I would name them, and I would have to do what was necessary. Just telling the truth, and their abuse of power and what they had done, whatever violations under the UC Uniform Code of Military Justice, what they had done wrong. UCMJ. I knew I had a case, I could have beat it, but man, they just took it out of me. I'm gonna tell you, I was done. I was done. I was looking forward then to just leaving, getting the fuck out of there. Nobody was coming for me, man. And I agreed then. I'm like, okay, I'll sign what you want. And then I do remember it was 4 days after that they then processed me out. Gave me an opportunity then to sign what they wanted me to. But they had me sit at attention for another 4 days. My situation was extended 4 days. I remember the 4 days. I don't remember how many days it was that they had me seated at attention. I honestly don't remember how long that was. Oh, God. I'm actually in pain talking about this shit. But, yeah, there I was, man. That's what happened. That was what was done to me. So I've asked, for a fair and just result in this matter. Considering all things considered, sir. It's hard to look for any compensation. What was taken from me? How do you give that back? It's impossible. So one thing that would be nice is to have retirement status. I want you to consider the golden ticket I had, being at the pinnacle, and I was a career airman. I was on my second enlistment, sir. I was awaiting orders to serve at the Pentagon in honor of being recognized and awarded as being the best that the United States Air Force had in my job, my AFSC. I had been promoted to an NCO without having to even go to NCO school. That's not something that's done, sir. But I was fast-tracked. So I went from the pinnacle to what I just told you. So having retirement status, I think, is fair. Pay grade. I think about what it was that was taken from me. I believe I would have at least made it to E8. I would have stayed in probably over 23 years. And I would have gone on and probably worked in a GS position, making more money with what it was that I had accomplished in the Air Force. So, retirement status with back pay from the date of discharge at an E8 pay grade. Retirement status from that time. And that would be 7/25/89. 7/25/89 is when I was discharged. Back pay from that date at an E8 pay grade over 23 years. That's a lot more money. But the back pay from that retirement status, then I would possibly have the autonomy to have the work done that I need. They've stalled me. The VA has now for 7 years, man, needing hip replacement surgery. You really can't imagine what that is. I doubt you know anybody that's been told that they needed hip replacement surgery and has fucking waited 7 years. I'll be willing to bet you know no one. Because I don't think people live too damn long after that. Knowing how this has slowed me down and how my health has fucking deteriorated through inactivity. The first 4 years that they stalled my needing hip replacement surgery, my activity so slowed down, it was like imperceptible, it was so insidious that my sugar got out of control and I became insulin dependent. If you know anything about diabetes, man, it's a motherfucker. Now I'm fighting that and all the complications, of that, the threat of having a fucking stroke or a heart attack. My circulation is all fucked up, having been stalled, needing hip replacement surgery. So, with all and everything that I've mentioned about what was done to me when I was in the Army National Guard and what was done to me when I was in the United States Air Force, I'd ask please for a fair and just result. And seeing as there was no formality in my being surveilled, in my being kept from sharing anything about that multi-billion-dollar disaster, that none of our authorities have the courage or decency to even call it for what it is, let alone to go after and prosecute the perpetrators. I don't think it's unreasonable. I've opted out of the silencing settlement. I don't have anything to do with it. I'm not going to sign off on any goddamn lies. I don't think it's unreasonable. As a courtesy, I'm asking, for a fair and just result. Can you help me with this? Do you have, the decency to help me? Do you? If you're right in front of my face, I would ask you, sir, do you have the decency to help me? Knowing what I just told you. I don't know. I hope you do, because I tell you, I really need the help. I would have the autonomy with the back pay to be able to get the care that I need. There's amenities, facility that I need. There's a lot that I could explore with holistic, protocols. Because the VA, man, this fucking shit, even with my adult attention deficit disorder, that challenge, it can be a real superpower, as I have shown, when I was in the Air Force. When you totally focus on, your task at hand. But, being in a situation like this where, you've got to organize to fucking file for benefits and all the fucking shit, that you have to do to organize to get any help with anything like this. You can see here I am, how many years after this is done, and only over the past couple years have I asked for any help with these things. So, I was, when I moved from Georgia to Pennsylvania, 8 years ago, I asked the VA if they would help me to pay for a prescription of Adderall that I was getting, I had prescribed from an outside doctor, and they wouldn't help me. So I lost that. So first of all, that was not just for my cognitive, for me to function, to organize my thoughts and focus. It also was a stimulant. I didn't realize it, but to keep my metabolism cooking. So it was supporting my metabolism, and that slowed down so much through the inactivity with the, the injury needing hip replacement surgery. I've got inveterate problems with my cervical and lumbar and thoracic spine from injuries that happened there at Elstis Air Force Base. But a lot of challenges, man. But I'm hoping that you would please help me. Can you help me? Can you look into these matters?